Okay, welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, the J.R. Stewart.
And I am your co-host, the Tommy D. Duncan III. Jimmy, it
All
is
right.
Wednesday.
If it's Wednesday time and 8 p.m., that means Black Men Speak.
Yes,
So let's
sir.
give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share the information, not necessarily in that order, but get those three things done if you haven't done them already. Please spread the word as we try to grow this channel. And whether you're watching us on YouTube Live, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, it's all the same. We welcome you to join the conversation through our chat line, and our phone line is open also for those who are brave enough, Tom, to come and speak with us and to us about their views and their thoughts.
Yes, sir.
So, Tom, let's get started. What's the topic for tonight?
Well, Jimmy, we have had another first in history this week. We were
Oh man,
thinking about,
okay, a first.
yeah, we had another first this week, and it just so happens to be in the world of sports, but it isn't the sport that most people are thinking about this time of the year, which is football. Jimmy, we have had three young sisters who have absolutely done it in the world of gymnastics, who have won, basically swept the world championships this past week, Jimmy. And we'd like to talk to celebrate and elevate these sisters who won the world championships this year. So we had Connor McLean, who won the gold,
Okay.
Elise Jones, who won the silver, and Jordan Childs, who won the bronze at the World Championships in women's gymnastics.
Now, Tom, I watched some of the competition. I didn't watch the till the end. Um, but are you telling me that in the sport of gymnastics, now, which is normally not a traditional sport that blacks dominate,
Correct.
are you telling me that
We dominate.
three black girls have dominated that sport? That's what you're saying, Tom? That has
Dominate.
to be a first in history.
It is a first in history that three black women have swept this event. I'm not going to say that it was a surprise, but I was surprised. And I say that to the degree to which we have had within the last couple of years, the GOAT, probably among the GOATs of all sports. And we will talk about her and a few other ones. But first, we'd like to celebrate these three sisters who have literally swept all the finalists in the World Championships this past week. We'd like to applaud these young sisters because, I mean, as brothers, Jimmy, we have to celebrate, we have to elevate, and we have to protect our sisters. And so, it was very odd to me that I saw nothing in the mainstream news. I mean, I had to go to channels that typically I wouldn't go to, and this is such a significant event. I was wondering why the heck didn't we see this, on the main news networks? Why didn't we see this on CNN or whatever the case is as soon as it happened? But Jimmy, that's why we are here. We are part of
Correct.
the new world media, Jimmy. And if we're not going to support and elevate our own, then who else is going to do?
Well, Tom, that's absolutely correct, and you are correct in that assessment. I too have searched around, uh, trying to find this information on the mainstream media channels, and I have yet to find. That's not to say that it doesn't exist, but but I will say it doesn't exist to the extent that it's easily found.
Correct.
So either it's being hidden or it's just not being shown at all, or it's being shown at a time when no one's watching. But
And
Tom, this is very significant, and I don't like playing the race card. You know that, but I'd imagine that if this was three Hispanics or three white girls, that this somehow would be a newsworthy to somebody. So but the fact that it's three black girls is pretty much under the radar, and no one really knows too much about it, other than the fact that it's being talked about here on Black Men Speak, and um, hopefully it's a delayed reaction. Let's just hope that others follow our lead and start publicizing the story a little bit more after this show.
yeah, I would say it's just shameful, quite
Very.
frankly, shameful. And we think about this, Jimmy, and even if we look at the greatest of all time, Simone Biles
Yes.
is the most celebrated gymnast, the most celebrated, not just women's gymnast, but probably the most celebrated gymnast of all time.
Tom, she may have been the most medal celebrated athlete, period. Um, Now, if I think about, I'm trying to think, I can't think of too many folks who have had her level of success. Maybe Michael Phelps in the pool, but that's pretty much about it. You know, maybe Usain Bolt in track, but yes, she's definitely the goat of gymnastics all time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 25 world championships, Jimmy, 7 Olympic gold medals.
Wow.
By far the most decorated gymnast in history. I mean, 5 for a female, the most all around titles in the world.
Hmm.
And we really didn't hear a lot about Simone Biles
You're
until
right.
the very end of her career.
True.
So, I mean, again, if we don't celebrate, elevate, and share our love, for our sisters, then, it's really not anybody else's job, but it's shameful that nobody else is highlighting and illustrating what these young women have done. Because, quite frankly, you have to understand that, as you said, this is not a particular sport that young girls or young boys, for that matter, really get involved with within our community.
No,
And
Tom, they don't.
the resources are not there. We've never seen the faces that look like us there. And to think that now, really just within a generation and a half, that we have the greats that we have, and we think that we really didn't get involved into this sport until the very end of the 20th century, and we're going back to Dominique Dawes.
Right, to Dominique and Gabby and some. But Tom, this bears out a bigger picture here that I want people to understand. We tend to think that our dominance is in sports, that we're very, very athletic people. We've been blessed with gifts that probably many people around the world, other cultures, do not have. And a lot of that speaks to our connection with the Almighty. That's in my opinion. But if you want to debate that, I can prove it. But Tom, this also should bear out that you can do whatever you put your mind to. That when you make up your mind to becoming a champion, whether it be in gymnastics, whether it be in sports, golf, or academic, if you decide you want to go to MIT and graduate, if you put your mind to it and work hard enough and willing to be disciplined about it, you can do it. Tom, it's a shame that a lot of our kids think that sports and entertainment are the only way out. So I'm here to tell you that the world, the universe is your oyster. Dream big. Don't allow others to limit you in your dreams and your desires. Be willing to think big and dream big, and then go out and fight for those dreams. Those three girls, Tom, had to work extremely hard to get to where they are. We know the kind of work that Simone put in, the training, the pretty much starving yourself for 20 years, not being able to eat more than two pieces of lettuce, maybe. Um, but and the fact that she was determined to be the best at her craft, Tom. She didn't just settle for some success. Some success wasn't what she was working toward. Her goal was to beat and outdo herself. Even when she accomplished something one year, she would be determined to do more next year. I mean, she came up with moves that no one else had done, before in this sports. That's how she pushed herself. So, young people out there, do not be afraid to think big and dream big. No one can place limits on your accomplishments but you. And so, and if you believe what others say about what you can do and where you can go and what you can achieve, then you're going to be limited at that point. And I'm saying free your mind, because there's nobody out there that can stop you from achieving your goal, and there's no one can stop you from uh, reaching your desired levels in life but you.
And this is the other thing that I think about on this, Jimmy. Um, in an area like gymnastics,
Hmm.
most of these young men and young women, they start as children,
I'd
literally.
have to. Yes, very
Um, and
7, 8 years old.
yeah, six.
6
Six,
sometimes,
six.
yes.
I was looking up a couple of these sisters, and they start as early as 6 years old. And we talk about playing chess versus checkers. And
Hmm.
this is a game of psychology. And when you think of the amount of time, discipline, commitment, sacrifice that it takes to be at a competitive level, we're not talking about at a championship level, but to be at a competitive level, starting at the age of 6, literally sacrificing your life. You brought up
Tom, your whole life.
literally. And, in the case of, like a Simone Biles, she had to move away from her family and,
Yes.
and, and give up time with her family, her friends, things that, most young people choose to do. And this is a game of chess, not checkers.
Tom, all these young gymnasts have to do the same thing. They live year round with their coaches. They're away from their family, their friends. They don't go to school the way normal kids do. They're training from 4:30 in the morning to 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night every day, 7 days a week. This is what it takes. So normally it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something, to become a subject matter expert in some field, become really competent at playing an instrument or something. Tom, 10,000 hours is a down payment for these girls,
Yes.
for these young people. That's just that's a starting point. You're really talking about maybe 100,000 hours total over their lifetime to get to where they are. That's the kind of commitment you have to make. But Tom, if you're willing to pay the price to get there, and you stick with it, and God, forbid you get injured or anything, but absent of any of that, you have a very good shot at getting there if you just work hard enough at doing it, Tom, and stick with it. Most people don't do that, Tom. They maybe start on that path, but then they start listening to others tell them what they can't do. That's not a sport for black people. All you wasting your time. All these negativity. Once that gets into your psyche and you start believing it, then becomes your reality.
You're correct, Jimmy. You have to be mentally tough, mentally strong, extremely disciplined, extremely
Extremely.
dedicated. Something, Jimmy's, interestingly enough, that folks don't associate with athletics when it comes to the type of athletics that we reinforce in a lot of our communities. I mean, hey, we focus on the big ball sports. We talk about football, basketball, the volleyball,
Baseball,
things that maybe soccer.
a
But
little bit. Un poco.
exactly. But in a lot of our local schools, a lot of our urban schools, you don't see gymnastics being highlighted as much. And so to think that, again, we're about a generation and a half of having a presence in high level gymnastics. And within really a generation, we have among the greatest of all time in the Simone Biles. We have Gabby Douglas, who is one of the greats. We have Dominique Dawes, who in 1996 was a pioneer in the sport.
Yes.
And now we have these young sisters here who are representing the next generation of young women in this sport. Connor McLean, Shalise Jones, Jordan Childs, and you now see these girls, I believe, 17, 19, 20. And now when families are sitting in front of their television watching gymnastics and you see 3-year olds, 4-year olds, 5 years old, 6 years old, looking at these sisters competing at a high level, winning at a high level, who look just like them. And you know what? They say, you know what? I want to be like her. And the reality of it is, because of the brilliance within our minds, within our psychology, Jimmy, the world, to your point, is our oyster when it comes to this segment and other segments of greatness. This is just one segment when we talk about sports. But when we talk about greatness, psychology, commitment, these are things, Jimmy, that we are looking at. I can't imagine what's going to happen within the next 10 years or so.
Well, Tom, also think about this. If your goal is to be the first person to, to get close to the orbit of the sun, for instance, getting and not burn up. And let's just say you don't quite make it to the sun, but you do make it to the moon. Well, you still have done something only a handful of people have done. So if your goal is to be the next Simone Biles and you don't quite make it, I guarantee you, with the skills that you acquire, you're still good enough to compete at the collegiate level. I mean, a lot of these girls as they get older, may not have the shape, the body size, or the skills to be on a national team to be an Olympian. But if you look at the college ranks, Tom, there are a lot of young ladies in gymnastics competing at the college level, well into their 20s. When generally anything past 20 would be an old maid on the competitive scale, the world competitive scale for gymnastics.
And for those who are out there listening, um, call in. Let us know what your thoughts are, about what has happened this week. Your thoughts on the impact that some of the greats in gymnastics. When we think about a Dominique Dawes in the late '90s, if we think about a Gabby Douglas, this century within the last decade, who was one of the greats,
Right.
Simone Biles, who is the most decorated. What impact do you think they have made on this country, on women, on the sport, so to speak? So call us 972-497-2280. Let us know what your thoughts are, because we'd like to hear from you and hear your thoughts on, what impact you think that these young women have made on sports. Because, Jimmy, when we look at the news, when we look at mass media, unfortunately, we don't always see the positive, the constructive things that are going on within
Oh,
our.
Tom, that's not the narrative they want to put out there. You know, just recently, these convenience store attacks in New York and down the Bronx. I saw one video just a few days ago where it seemed like maybe 100 people, just bum rushed the store and just were just looting and taking whatever they wanted. Um, those are the stories that you will see on the news. I have no problem finding those stories of us being thugs and criminals and doing criminal acts. But to see us doing scholarly things or see us do great things like these three young ladies have done, Tom, there should be a parade thrown somewhere for these girls for what they've achieved, and like you said, we can't leave it to others to tell our story. That's been our problem. That we're sitting around waiting for others to tell our story, and they have no interest. Tom, it's not to their benefit to tell our positive stories. And if we don't do it ourselves, then most likely it's not going to get done. Or when it does get done, it's pretty much like Simone at the tail end of her career. You've been doing this since you're the age of 8 years old, 6 years old, and you've won so many world championships. I mean, how many do you have to win, Tom? I mean, I can think of some other Olympians and gymnasts who have nowhere near the success of Simone, but became household names after winning a world championship or the Olympics. And this lady's won 7 or 8 Olympics and 20 some world championships, and she's barely known. What's wrong with this story, Tom?
Well, what's wrong with the story, Jimmy, is that number one, we don't own the channels to driving the image of our own community in mass media. Historically, we've had, let's say even if we're starting post Reconstruction into the early part of the 20th century, we had a lot of local newspapers. We had a lot of local Black newspapers throughout the country. Chicago, Pittsburgh, you name it, we had it. Over the years, unfortunately, a lot of these channels went out of business, or they were starved one way or another,
Right.
and we have less say so in terms of the images that are created as it pertains to our community. And that's why we have to reimagine and rebuild the channels of mass media and how that shapes our community. Think about it, Jimmy. We now have the GOAT in women's gymnastics. We have the GOAT in women's tennis in one Serena Williams.
Right.
And, who's next? We have the greats of the greats. And I think we've talked about this before, but when there is a fair and equal playing ground for all to participate, we understand what we can do.
Right. Well, Tom, some understand what they can do. Too many of us believe that there's so much that we can't do, not realizing that greatness is within everyone's reach. So you just have to be willing to go out there and make it happen. It's not going to become reality if you don't put the work in. Somehow you don't wake up one day to become a world champion become an Olympic champion. Tom, you don't become the best ever just by doing very little. You have to work very hard. It takes a lot of work and dedication. But let me say this: there's generally only one goat. There's there's only a handful of people who compete at world levels, at global levels, or national levels. But Tom, that doesn't mean that because you don't reach that level, that you still can be good at something. You may not become a great musician or composer like Mozart or someone, but you can really become a very good musician and songwriter and composer in your own right. So, the first step is believing that you can do something, or having a desire to do something and believing that you can do it. And use the people who have come before you, Tom. These young ladies, they're still alive. They're not our ancestors, but you don't have to wait till someone die in order to be motivated by what they've done. If they can do it, I'm not going to say you can do it. I'm going to say you can come close to doing what they're doing. Who knows? Maybe you can outdo them if you work hard enough. But at the very least, you can be very good in your own right by pushing yourself, and no matter what you do.
Yeah, you can absolutely be not good, but even great. And I want to, thank Brother Asar again for supporting us. Got a note from him saying it should be noted that great athleticism achievement requires more than athleticism and skill. It
Hmm.
also takes knowledge of the sport strategy and great mental acuity, which is absolutely right, and probably more so than in gymnastics. I mean, when you think of what you have to do in gymnastics, being on that balance beam, I mean, I don't even want to think about
Tom,
doing some of the stuff they do.
I am so amazed, so in awe of these young ladies who are on that beam. Tom, that beam is only 5 inches wide. That's one. Two, that thing is made of solid oak wood. You fall on that thing the wrong way, you're going to hurt yourself. That hurts, especially when you're talking about your shin bones and your leg. I can only imagine how many falls that it takes over your career that you've experienced. How many times you've been injured on that thing? Yeah, it's not like the uneven bars or the vault or something else where there's lots of padding around. No, when it's just you in that wood, 5 inches, Tom, for what they do on that thing and the balance, and especially Simone, because she pushed it not to just a next level, Tom. She pushed it almost out of the universe with some of the moves that she added to her routines and created. I mean, she has several moves named after her.
Yeah,
I now watch and I see some of these young gymnasts now that are coming up, doing some of her moves that she invented. Like I said, her competition that wasn't necessarily with everyone else. Her competition was with herself. She's trying to outdo herself year after year after year. So use that as motivation to see what it takes in order to get to that level, and the kind of work, dedication, and discipline you have to have, and apply it to your life. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be sports. You can apply those things to other aspects of your life and achieve the results that you want to achieve.
yes, whether that's sports, whether that's engineering, whether that's mathematics, whether
Correct.
that's science, whether that is philosophy. I mean, you brought up music a little bit earlier. I mean, if we go back, I mean, Louis Armstrong revolutionized how people thought about music. When you think of the great Duke Ellington,
Yes.
who merged in essence
Great
classical.
composer, Tom.
Exactly. Among the greatest composers of all time who merged and created a fusion of different genres. And I mean, most people don't realize the impact that these men had with the barriers that they had themselves, what they were able to do, what they were able to create.
Well, Tom, I'm glad you mentioned that because if you look at the sort of the invention of gospel music, or we call soul music sometimes, and these were slaves on a plantation who pretty much created this musical style, this singing style. One, to help them get through the day. Sometimes to help communicate messages to keep those that didn't want to know what they were singing about or talking about or what they were communicating to each other. But Tom, to go from that and to transform gospel into jazz, into R&B, into pop, I mean, these were all great people who did these, made those transitions, and jazz is now revered around the world.
Yes,
I'm a big blues fan myself, but even blues came out of gospel.
correct.
Um, a lot of modern day music today, uh, I say some of it's not as good as some of the music of the 40s, 50s, and 60s that I love. But still, Tom, it took great people, very disciplined people, to make those transitions, to create these new styles that have become revered around the world. Now, hip hop, look at the hip hop, which I like early hip hop, but hip hop is becoming a phenomenon around the world also. Tom,
It is. I mean, hip hop is the number one musical genre globally
I think I was watching a video the other night of Korean people, South Koreans,
now. Hmm.
who love hip hop. Really, the conversation was about how well are black people accepted in Korea, and pretty much everyone that was interviewed, Tom, said that part of their attraction to the black culture was hip hop music.
Yeah, very very interesting, Jimmy. But I mean, you think about it: gospel, jazz, R&B, and you look at gospel and jazz as daughters. You know, of I'm sorry, I believe you said jazz and blues
Blues,
being
yes,
being the daughters of gospel, so to speak, and
yes.
then everything else branched out from there. And let's make it very clear: um, rock and roll was actually the genesis of rock and roll was within the black community, Jimmy.
Tom, when you go back and you listen to Fats Domino, when you go back and you listen to Jackie Wilson,
Yes.
especially Jackie Wilson, and you listen to Elvis Presley, and you see where a broken down blues, Memphis blues musician all of a sudden discovered, a style, a technique, and then to listen at his music going forward and Jackie Wilson's music that came before him, Tom, it's easy to see where Elvis, who some proclaim the king of rock and roll, I say if there's a king, Tom, I would reserve that title to Fats Domino, to definitely to Jackie Wilson, who never got the recognition and respect that he deserved. And those were people who even to some degree, I'm trying to think of the brother's name. I don't know if he's still living or not. Help me out here, Tom. Very flamboyant, Little Richard.
Oh yeah, Little Richard.
Yeah, Little Richard, a huge impact. And then you look at some bands who are at least honest enough to speak about their influence, like the Beatles,
The Beatles.
who were heavily influenced by black music of the '60s. And you can actually hear that in some of their music. Um, but other musicians also have spoken, Tom, to their influence, how they were influenced by black music at the time. So, Tom, this points out that we don't always get the recognition that's due. We don't always get our fair shake many times, but it is undeniable the contributions when we decide to become great, that our contribution become immeasurable. And it's not just in sports and music and entertainment. Trust me, we have the skills to do this across the board, Tom, in every discipline there is if we apply ourselves. There's nothing that can stop us. We have a dynamic soul. There's a reason why our food is called soul food, our music is called soul food, and we even call soulful because people recognize the the godly aspects and attributes that are within all of us collectively, Tom. And we have to not be afraid to let that God given ability that we have come out. So many people are trying to shine, put your light out by telling you shouldn't boast, you shouldn't brag. That's why every opportunity when I introduce myself, I am the Jimmy Stewart. There are other Jimmy Stewarts before me, but I'm the Jimmy Stewart of this age and today. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm the greatest Jimmy Stewart that ever lived.
Absolutely. Well, let's get back on track, Jimmy,
It's,
to the original topic of the show and celebrating these great sisters and really celebrating the history of Black women in gymnastics. And then we can see where that takes us. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up this show. So let me get your thoughts, Jimmy, on what impact you think this recent generation of Black women will have when we look over the next 10 to 20 years? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Tom, I think that if they can get more visibility, it would be a great thing for black people as a whole. So there'll be children out there, and young girls and some young boys who may decide that they have been positively influenced by what they see. So, but I think within the circles itself, gymnastics is something that's highly viewed. A lot of people watch it on television, and I'm pretty sure, Tom, when those three girls got on that podium, um, there are a lot of other people who were shocked around the world. I'm pretty sure that within those circles, people are quietly talking about the event and what has happened, and probably are wondering, Tom, if this is going to become the norm. Will gymnastics end up being like basketball, for example?
Well, Jimmy, I will say this. When we look at the impact and the creativity that, Gabby, during her time, Dominique, I mean, she was a phenomenon. They called Dominique Dawes Awesome Dawson at the time.
Yes.
The uniqueness, the creativity, the flair that she brought. When you look at Gabby Douglas, when you look at Simone Biles, even in other sports, if you look at what Serena and Venus did for tennis,
Oh,
if
yes.
you look at what
Definitely Serena.
Tiger, when you look at what Tiger did for the sport of golf, it opened the doors, it opened the floodgates for other pockets of people who probably had never considered that sport.
Right.
And it brings more viewership to that sport. It brings more economic opportunities to that sport. Now, traditionally speaking, these Olympic athletes, I looked this up, they don't really get paid a lot of money, at least in this country, for winning gold medals at the Olympics or winning the world championships and things of that nature. I think for a gold medal at the Olympics, the U.S. pays them maybe $25,000, silver 15, and I think 10 for the bronze medal. Where they really make their money are, in endorsements and things of that nature. And Simone Biles,
Endorsements, Tom, and touring the country, um, giving out autographs and appearances.
exactly. Simone Biles did quite well last year. I mean, for those who want to look it up, she did quite well in 2021. Gabby Douglas quietly has done quite well because they used this opportunity, this platform, to build a global brand for themselves because gymnastics is a global sport. I mean, when we were growing up, Jimmy, it was, the Russians or,
Oh,
the Germans,
the Ukrainians.
exactly.
We were
Whoever.
trying. And definitely it wasn't Poland. It was Romania. Oh,
Right. Yeah.
Romania is dominating. That's where what's the young gymnast who got the first perfect 10? Nadia Comaneci
Yeah. Now
back
you're
in the
coming each. I remember
yes.
that. And so, really, this sport, think about it, Jimmy. When we were growing up, or when I was growing up at least, this was not a sport that the U.S. dominated.
No, it wasn't. It
But
was not.
now that the U.S. has really taken a step forward in terms of being more dominant in this sport, and now we have among the most dominant gymnasts, and among them the most dominant gymnast of all time, opening up this sport for opportunities to young women and young men, for that matter, of all communities. When you look at the visibility, when you look at the economics, there is a huge difference, for instance, when Tiger was playing and when he wasn't playing in
All
golf.
right.
Huge
Yeah.
difference in terms of the viewership, huge difference in terms of the money
Oh,
that it
Tom, when he
brings.
was playing, anytime he was made it to the weekend, that of course you have to qualify on Thursday and Friday, but then everyone who makes a cut plays on Saturday and Sunday. And whenever he made the cut, Tom, yeah, the viewership was off the chart for golf. Um, I've never imagined that one person could bring so much to golf. So it's not just the purses and the money that he won, Tom. Um, Hell, they should have paid him to appear at every tournament, because anytime he was around, viewership was just viewership would be up. And then when
Right.
he was hurt and injured, when the period that he couldn't play, viewership pretty much returned back to normal what it was before. So that goes to show. And the same thing with tennis, man. When those Williams sisters are
Yes.
dominant, especially Serena. Um, and Tom, I mean, it's not any kind of knock against Serena, but she is not the traditional build of a tennis player,
No, she's
a
not.
female. You know, so this just goes to show that I'm sure that. In fact, I remember when they hit the scene, Tom. I thought Venus was going to be the more successful one of the two. I really thought Serena was a little too thick and heavy to make the moves. But Tom, I was wrong. She has been the most dominant tennis player
Of
probably
all
in the history, probably in the history of tennis. And still, I mean, I think either the wife told me or maybe I heard it somewhere that she's going to retire
yeah,
soon.
she is retired.
Okay.
And so it is the end of a generation of greatness in women's tennis. And we salute you, Serena. We salute you, Venus, for what you have done for this golf because they have pushed the envelope in terms of getting more money for female tennis players. And Venus in
Yes.
particular led that drive for getting more money and closing that gap between men's tennis players and women's tennis players in the sport. And typically, Jimmy, if we look at what Simone Biles did in this past Olympics, when she said, you know what, something's going on, something's not right, and not being pressured to do something that might hurt her permanently, she stood up where other folks may not have had the courage to stand up. And so, Jimmy, when we enter sports, we somehow always bring something different to the sport that opens it up. Folks who were never watching that particular sport are now watching that sport. We're pushing for things that folks maybe just didn't have the courage to do, or for whatever reason, it didn't seem to be relevant to them. And so, I hope for, these next three gymnasts that we are celebrating today for what they have done this week, that they take that baton that has now been passed to them by Simone Biles, by Gabby Douglas, earlier by Dominique Dawes, and they push the envelope for greatness, not just in terms of accolades in the sport, but for visibility, for opening up this particular sport to folks who maybe young women who maybe never considered this sport before. And so
Right.
the world is their oyster, Jimmy, really.
Well, Tom, here's what I wish. I know that this is not a poor person's sport. That I'm pretty sure the parents have to work really hard and sacrifice to pay the trainers, the trips, um, to pay for the accommodations, everything else that goes along with getting to this level. I'm pretty sure now it's becoming a little easier. I'm pretty sure that sponsors are lining up to help cover some of that cost now. But I wish these young ladies, Tom, with the short season that they have to go tour and do personal visits, that they find a way to make it to some schools in the inner city that normally wouldn't have the money, wouldn't be able to afford to pay them to come. Um, you can hopefully maybe write it off as a pro bono trip, but there are a lot of kids out there that would benefit tremendously from being able to see you, touch you, talk to you, ask you questions, and see that you're no different than they are. Who do we have on the hotline, Tom?
I don't know, Jimmy. Let's see if we have someone calling in and see what we got to say. Black Men Speak. This is Tommy Duncan. If you would tell us your name, where you're from, and what your thoughts or question are for today. Okay, I guess they hung up, or that wasn't a
Well,
call
call us
to
back if you got disconnected. The chat line, the phone line is still open. So, yes, call back and join the conversation.
All
But
right.
yeah, but yes,
Well,
Tom, I wish that some of these some kids from the inner city, really get a chance. I know that the travel season is short. There are only so many personal appearances that you can do. You still have to train to get ready for the next events. The Olympics are coming up in 2 years, so I understand all those things. But if possible, like I said, a lot of kids could benefit from getting a chance to see national champions lined up the way they were on that podium.
yeah, Jimmy, and I think the great thing that I see about this, everybody is not going to be tall enough, physical enough to play
It's true.
basketball. I mean, I mean, you in women's, for instance, in women's basketball, I mean, you have some young ladies who may be at 5'4", 5'6", 5'8", but you have to be pretty tall, pretty naked to play basketball, and God forbid in volleyball. So,
Mm.
I mean, this sport for those young ladies who are petite, who are athletic, who are disciplined, who are focused, there's an opportunity out there for you, and with a great deal of commitment and discipline. Hey, this is another channel to express your greatness. That black girl magic, I'll call
Yes. And Tom, I mean, other sports also, track and field.
it. Yes,
You look at the dominance there. Um, but this just goes to show, Tom, you were talking about that element that was something special. And I still say that that special element that exists within us, is more of our connection with the Almighty, and which is why we need to let our light shine, Tom. We should never ever, denigrate, downgrade, allow someone to insult our talents or our abilities or tell us what we can't do. God gave you abilities for that purpose, Tom, and if you just let it shine, let it come out, you may not even know what you're capable of until you actually achieve something. And then if you set your sights on something higher and greater, then there's no telling how great you could be. Simone didn't know how great she could be at 6 years old. She just
correct.
knew she wanted to do gymnastics. And I'm sure she won her first world championship, her first national championship, her first Olympics. There was probably something in her that told her that she was not done. I mean, that she could have stopped right there and been,
Correct.
considered highly successful. Decide to go eat pizza and put on some weight and have a normal life. But
Yeah,
Tom, there was something in her that drove her to outdo herself, to become even better than that. So she had to truly believe at that point that she was capable. And so, for anyone who told her that she was too short or too this or too that, there's no way she could have listened to them, and there's no way she could have believed what they were telling her, and then go out and do the things that she did. So, for her to do what she did, Tom, she had to believe in her and her greatness, and believe that, that no matter what she achieved, that there was still more that she could achieve.
I would agree. I would agree with you on that, Jimmy. And so, today we celebrate these sisters and what they have accomplished this week. We celebrate the greats, in the past. We celebrate Black Girl Magic. We celebrate the brilliance, the beauty, and the intellect of Black womanhood. We support you. We salute you. We love you, and we embrace you as Black men, and we want to see and applaud you in your greatness. So, Jimmy, I guess we can provide any closing comments, and then we can wrap our show up. If there's anybody out there who would like to call in, who would like to give their thoughts, ask any questions, or make comments on this show, feel more than happy to do so at 972-497-2280. Otherwise, we will make our closing comments and we will wrap it up for this evening. So, final thoughts, Jimmy?
My final thought, Tom, is a young lady that won the came in first place in the overall. She was being interviewed, and the lady interviewing her said, "Well, how does one celebrate a national championship like this? What do you do?" And Tom, her response was, she was going to go out and hang out with her sister because her family was there. She was going to go hang out with her sister for a little while, and that's how they were going to celebrate. But Tom, that speaks to how isolated you are in that sport. You're away from your family, you're away from your mother, fathers, your siblings, your friends, and you have to commit so much to that sport. So much so, Tom, that just hanging out with her sister is her treat. For most of us, Tom, we do something great and we want to go celebrate. We're going out, we're drinking, we're having a good time, we're socializing with a bunch of people, some people we don't even know. But hanging out with your sibling wouldn't be the high point of our life. But this just goes to show what you have to do to be great, Tom, and to be at that level. And if you're not willing to pay the price, then don't expect that your life is ever going to be great in any aspect.
Yeah, I would agree. And then also I have a note here from my brother Asar,
Okay.
wanting to mention the accomplishments of Shelley Ann Fraser Price, the great sprinter, and her
Oh,
as well. And she has given birth to a child, which I had no idea that Shelley Ann Fraser Price was pregnant. So
I didn't know
congratulations.
either.
And so
Uh,
that's just more black girl magic.
yeah, Tom. Yeah, that she's a great sprinter, and maybe on a different show, we could talk about her in the 4x100 relays not too long ago. So
All right, Jimmy. Well, that's all that I have for the day. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. We want to thank you for listening in. We want to continue to applaud these young sisters, and we wish you the greatest and the best of luck. And we expect the best from you. And you will now be carrying the mantle, the torch
yes,
for the
pick
next
it up.
generation. And we'll be behind you. We'll be rooting for you. And who knows, Jimmy? Maybe we'll be in the stands one of these days. I've never been to
Well,
a gymnastics competition, but
and Tom, for those that haven't watched these young ladies, go find the reruns. Go find a streaming someplace from your carrier. But make sure you go check these girls out and hopefully be inspired by what they've done.
yes, sir. All right, Jimmy. Well, that is it for this evening, and we will see everyone next week.
Yes. Tom, do we know the topic for next week that we
Uh,
can?
Jimmy, we
Or we're
actually
still
are
working.
going to have we're actually going to have our subject matter experts in real estate. There are some things that are
Okay.
happening in the market right now. Things are beginning to cool off a little bit. Interest rates have been going up, and there have been some
Yes.
interesting things happening in the real estate market. So we're going to have one or a couple of our real estate experts to join us next week and talk about what's going on and how we need to position ourselves to take advantage of it.
Okay. Well, with that being said, we're going to close the show out. Thank you. See everyone next week.